Well, good afternoon, everybody. It's been another great day here on the farm. Hope you've had good weather wherever you are. Before I get into this video, I just want to provide a little background on it because I'm not the main person in it. One of our neighbors and friends is, and her name is Carolyn. And she's been conducting research towards her PhD thesis over the last number of years up in the Northwest Territories. And that research relates to climate change and how it may affect tree and bush growth up there in the Northwest Territories, and obviously it can be applied here to some degree as well. But in order to do that, she needed to use a methodology to assess and age trees in the field and then also look at the results in the lab when she got back. So she used a time-tested method to do that, known as tree coring, and that's what this little video is about, because she needed to teach the methodology of this process to Dene students up in the Northwest Territories, and she thought that it might be useful to have a video to do that. So a few years ago during COVID, one afternoon, Carolyn and I went out on her property and filmed this little video about tree coring. And in the end, that was used as a teaching method for the students up there, just to give them background, insight into tree coring, how you do it, and what it can be used for, and why it's valuable, and that kind of thing. So that's the background around how this video was developed. And it is an interesting process. Interesting how you can look at the history of trees through their rings. I hope you enjoy this video. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Carolyn, and I'd like to put this next video into context. I'm a graduate student, and I study the growth rings of black spruce at Treeline in the Northwest Territories. I received some funding from a private foundation to share my research techniques with students at schools in my study area. Now, this video was put together to demonstrate how to core a tree, and my school visits were planned for spring of 2022. However, trees at that time, at the time of my visit, would still be dormant, and so I wouldn't be able to actually core live trees with the students. So I'm hoping that this video, paired with some hands-on sample processing, will serve as an adequate demonstration of tree coring in lieu of the real thing. Now, my study area is very remote, and so too are the Dene communities that I had hoped to visit. Now, ultimately, I didn't feel I could respectfully travel to places like Wekwati, Gemeti, or Wati within the very strict financial constraints and timelines set by my funders. So I've declined their project money, and I look forward to collaborating with my Dene colleagues on a self-funded visit in healthier and more stable times.
Edanate, Carolyn Sie, Si Ontario Gotson Ate. I'm on the lands of the Anishinaabe people, and their traditional territory extends at the far southern end of what we call the Canadian Shield. And the Canadian Shield is made up of a base rock of granite, just like what we have here. And it's the same granite that extends from where I am in the south all the way north to where you are in your communities in the Northwest Territories. And so we're on the same rock right now. And yet, as you can see around me, the trees that are above this rock are very, very different between here in Ontario and up north in the Northwest Territories. The differences between trees in Ontario and trees in the Northwest Territories is entirely due to our different climates and our patterns of daylight. So here in Ontario, we have fairly warm temperatures, we have quite a bit of rain, and we get very long summer growing seasons. And that same amount of temperature, high temperatures, and wetness and time also means that when a tree in a forest here dies and falls to the ground, it decomposes a lot faster into nutrients and turning into soil. So here we have trees breaking down, the leaf litter breaking down, and below that, the rich, healthy soils that will help future trees here grow big and tall and with thick trunks. Whereas in the Northwest Territories, you have colder temperatures, you have drier conditions, and your summers are very, very short. So trees where you are take a long time to grow. They grow very, very slowly. And so their trunks are smaller and they don't get as tall as the trees here in Ontario. Here where I live, the trees are mostly deciduous. And what that means is that these are trees that lose their leaves in the winter. Some deciduous trees that you might be familiar with from the Northwest Territories are species like poplar and birch. And around here, we have many different species of deciduous trees. Behind me are some sugar maples that are really well known. They're only found around my part of the world, but many people come to visit to see all the colorful leaves that they drop in the fall. Where you live, your trees are coniferous. So that would be your black spruce, your white spruce, trees that hold onto their leaves all through the year. But even though they still have their leaves in the winter, just like our trees here, the deciduous trees that lose their leaves, all of these trees stop growing for the winter in our climate. And the fact that these trees have a growing season through the summer and a season when they're not growing in the winter is really important for what I'm going to show you next.
You may have noticed that when a tree is cut down, for example, to build something or for firewood, there's a pattern of rings that shows up in the cut tree. And what each of these rings is it's 1 year of growth for the tree. It's a summer growing season. Now, if we cut a tree down right at the bottom, we could count those rings and get an idea of how old the tree is, get the tree's age. We can also, if we knew exactly when that tree was cut and what that outermost ring is, we could match that ring right at the far edge to the year the tree was cut, and we can count back and match each ring to a specific year. And that's a really powerful thing that we can do. For example, if there are patterns in the rings where some rings are very, very narrow, they're very thin, that would mean that in that year, the growing conditions weren't very good. So maybe it was a very cold year, or it was very, very dry, and the tree didn't put on a lot of growth. If there are some really, really wide rings, that would mean the opposite, that it was a really good growing season, temperatures were mild or warm, and there was enough moisture, rain for the tree, and it grew quite a bit. And what we can do is we can match those patterns of very wide rings and very narrow rings and figure out what the climate was like over the lifetime of the tree. People can learn a lot from the stories in the tree rings. Trees live a long time and they hold a knowledge of the past. I'm a scientist who studies the rings of trees to understand climate change. But fortunately, I don't need to cut trees down to see their rings. Let me show you what I do. Behind me is a conifer called a balsam fir, one of many species of conifers that grow in Ontario. And how old do you think this tree is? Well, we're going to find out, and we're going to do that without cutting the tree down. What we're going to do is we're going to take a core. To take a core, we use a piece of equipment called a borer. And a borer has 3 parts to it. Here I'm holding a metal sleeve. But if you unscrew the ends of the sleeve, there are 2 parts hidden below. The part that I'm pulling out very, very gently and very carefully is a part called the auger. And just like an auger that we would use to drill into the ice for ice fishing, this auger is what's going to drill into the tree and take our core. We pull it out very carefully because one end, called the bit end, is very, very sharp. We don't want to cut our fingers, but we also don't want to damage that end part. Hidden within the auger is a piece called the spoon. I'll pull the spoon out, and I'm just going to gently set my auger down on the moss here. And the spoon has a little bit of a dip in the center, and it has some teeth on the edge. And the spoon is what is going to pull the sample of our core out from the auger after we've drilled in. Now we don't need the spoon for now, so I'm just going to set it down. Then what you do is you take the auger, and the sleeve now becomes a handle. So this part opens like that, and we fit this piece in, close up, and now we have the tool that we're going to use to drill into the tree. When we choose a tree to core, just as I chose this balsam fir, we want to choose a tree that's fairly healthy because we're going to be making a small wound in the tree, and we want to make sure that it's healthy enough to produce a sap that's going to close up that small injury. And every culture, different people have their ways of thanking the land for what they're going to take from it. I understand the Dene people, you sprinkle tobacco on the land as thanks for any trees that you may cut or anything you may use from the land. For me, when I take a core from the tree or when I cut a tree for firewood, I always feel best thanking the tree and telling it what it's going to be used for and why I'm doing what I'm doing. So with this tree, I usually don't say this out loud, usually think it in my mind, think about what I'm doing, but I would say to this tree, you know, you're a nice healthy tree, and I'd like to take a core from you. I'm going to take a little bit of your tree wood, and I'd like to do that so I can find out how old you are, so that I can let others know and show this class how old you are and how I take a core. And it won't hurt at all, and being a healthy tree, it'll produce sap and will heal nicely. So thank you, tree. I appreciate that you're going to help me out with this. So to take the core, we want to choose an area of the tree. We're interested in the age, so we want to try and take our core as low down as possible. And we want to choose an area that doesn't have a lot of branches in the way, but we also need room for our handle to turn. So you take the core and you choose where you're going to put it in. I'm going to try right here. And then you need to push really, really hard. Push and turn. And you want to try and keep your auger nice and horizontal, nice and straight. Push and turn. And the good thing about coniferous trees is that they're fairly soft wood. So here we go, pushing and turning. With the trees that I core up in the Northwest Territories that are fairly small trunks, I usually grow right through the tree, but here I'm hoping to at least hit the center of the tree. And we can see how far we've gotten in by holding up our spoon against the side of the tree, and it looks like we're almost about halfway. Let's give it a couple more turns. There we go. So now what we do is we take our spoon, we put it in upside down, and we push it in. Push it all the way in. There we go. We give the bore a turn in the opposite direction. And then we pull our spoon out. It's a little stiff because it's got the wood. Oh, there we go. And we take it out very carefully. Here we go, look at this. Very nice. Very nice. So here's our core. We can already see some shapes of rings, dark and light rings. We've got the bark here. So what we'll do is we'll gently set this down. I think maybe over here. And we want to take the borer out of the tree right away because this is a healthy tree, and as soon as it's had something done to it, it's going to make sap. And that sticky sap could gum up our equipment and have it stuck in the tree. That's how quickly a healthy tree can heal itself. So we're really not doing much harm to the tree at all. There we go. Let me take that out. Set that down. And I have a straw into which I will put the core. So we can lift it out. Whoops. Oh, it's sap holding it. This bit here you might have to warp speed. There we go. And we'll stick our sample into the straw where we can tape it up and bring it home for safekeeping. Set that there, and we'll reassemble our equipment.
After we take a core, it needs to be dry before it can be mounted on a tray and then sanded to clearly show the rings. With some species, the rings do show up a little bit on the core, but they're never very clear. But once the tasks of mounting the core are done, then we can count the rings, and that's how we estimate the age of the tree. How old is the balsam fir that was cored? A preliminary look suggests there are 33 rings. So a reasonable estimate would be that the tree is about 35 to 40 years old. This sample still needs to be mounted and sanded so that the rings really are visible and we can get a better count. A nearby fir that was sampled has been mounted and sanded. And counting down their rings, this notation of 4 dots indicates a millennium year, so that's the year 2000. And I didn't quite hit center, but if you count down towards it, the growth ring, the last growth ring we can count is 1994. So this fir here was, I believe, about 30 years old. So we can say that these trees are in about the 30 to 35 year age range, established in the early 1990s.
Merci! I look forward to visiting your class and working on some finished tree cores with you and learning about trees, your trees. So until then, Netsiyason.